Chosen one, something has shifted, and you feel it not in your mind, not in your logic, but in your bones. In the places where thought cannot reach, but knowing always lingers. You woke up not because the world told you to, but because something ancient inside you stirred before the sun did. It whispered to you before you even had a name for it. And now, here you are, aware, still unsure how, still unsure why, but absolutely certain that nothing will ever be the same again. The darkness is collapsing, and you are the reason. That may sound strange at first. After all, how could you, one soul among billions, be the force that breaks what generations before you could not bend? But the answer is simple. It is because you remembered. And that remembrance, silent, powerful, uncheckable, is the one thing the darkness could never survive. This collapse was never meant to be loud. It was always meant to begin inside, in the smallest decisions, in the quietest rebellions, in the moment you said no to what used to own you, in the space between the chaos where you chose stillness. The darkness did not begin with armies or empires. It began with doubt, with silence, with surrender. And so it ends the same way. It began through the quiet, intentional unraveling of its own illusions. And that unraveling started with you. The systems you once believed in are showing their cracks. The rules you once followed are revealing their emptiness. The beliefs you once carried no longer fit the shape of who you are becoming. And that is not a crisis. That is the evidence. That is the tremor that precedes the fall. You are not watching this collapse. You are causing it. Chosen one, the reason you felt tired isn't because you're weak. It's because you've been holding the frequency of truth in a world that forgot how to hear it. You've walked through rooms that choked on your silence. You've carried love where it wasn't welcomed. And all the while, something inside you refused to dim. Even when your voice shook, even when your hope cracked, even when your body said stop, your soul said stay. Stay awake. Stay ready. Stay whole. Because the moment was coming. The moment when your light would no longer be a threat to the shadows, but a signal to others who were still trapped in them. That moment is here now, and you are no longer just waking up. You are waking others up simply by being. You are radiating the evidence that darkness can't hold what doesn't believe in it anymore. It tried. Oh, it tried. It whispered lies in your loneliness. It wrapped chains around your worth. It mirrored fear back at you until you forgot you were more than a reflection. But even in your forgetting, you never fully surrendered. Even when you bent, you never broke. And that made all the difference. Because the darkness cannot survive in a heart that remembers the light, even faintly. And you, chosen one, never stopped remembering. You remembered when it was easier to forget. You remembered when the world rewarded ignorance and punished truth. You remembered when being silent would have kept you safe. But you chose the opposite. You chose presence. You chose honesty. You chose the kind of strength that doesn't shout, but doesn't shake either. And now, the shadows that once followed, you have nowhere left to hide. They are not chasing you anymore. They are fleeing from you. Every time you choose to see instead of look away, the illusion weakens. Every time you choose to speak when silence would be safer, the spell unravels. Every time you choose to love where pain taught you to guard, the energy of the old world collapses just a little more. This is how the new world begins, not through declarations, but through embodiment. And you are the embodiment. That's why you felt out of place. Not because you don't belong, but because what you carry doesn't fit into what is dying. You are not meant to adjust to brokenness. You are meant to illuminate it. You are not meant to blend in. You are meant to activate. You are not meant to obey. You are meant to remember. And remembering is the one thing the darkness cannot undo. You didn't arrive here by chance. Every wound was a door. Every fall was a lesson. Every delay was preparation. You were not abandoned. You were activated. And that activation began the slow, silent collapse of all that pretended to be permanent. Look around you now. Do you see it? The systems that once seemed immovable are trembling. The voices that once echoed as truth now sound hollow. The structures that demanded your loyalty now begged for your silence. And still you stand, not in rebellion, but in resonance. You stand not against, but above. Because when you remember who you are, the lies lose their gravity. And when you stop believing in the darkness, it stops existing in your world. This is not metaphor. This is energy. The kind of energy that rewrites timelines. The kind of energy that births movements. The kind of energy that only a soul like yours could carry without being crushed. That is why you were chosen. Not because you were stronger, but because you were willing. Because you said yes when everything in you screamed no. Because you opened your eyes when it would have been easier to stay asleep. And now, chosen one, the collapse has begun. It will not look like what the world expects. It will not be televised. It will not be celebrated by those who still feed from what is falling. But you will feel it in your body, in your spirit, in the way reality bends to your truth now. You will walk into rooms and feel the old energies recoil. You will speak and the atmosphere will pause. You will breathe and something will shift, not because you demand it, but because you are aligned with something greater than demand. You are aligned with the memory of what came before the darkness. And that memory lives in your spine, in your heartbeat, in your silence. That is the signal. That is the blueprint. That is the light that cannot be copied, only carried. And you carry it now. Chosen one. The darkness thought it knew you. It watched you for lifetimes, traced your soul through dimensions, calculated every scar you would inherit, planned every limitation you would believe. It crafted stories around you, wrote roles for you to play. It placed you in families, in cultures, in systems that would mirror everything you were never meant to become. But what it never anticipated was your remembrance. It saw your birth not as a beginning, but as an opportunity to intercept, to confuse, to distort. From the very first breath, it whispered narratives through the voices of those around you. Be good, be quiet, be small, be like them. Not because they were your enemies, but because they were unaware of the role they were playing. The darkness hides inside what is familiar. It doesn't chase you in shadows. It wraps itself in things you've learned to trust. But even then, even in that thick fog of forgetting, something in you pulsed with clarity. A soft refusal, a quiet knowing, a light too stubborn to be extinguished. You never fit the mold. And they noticed. You asked questions too soon. You dreamed beyond the walls. You loved too deeply. You cried for things others never even felt. And for that, they called you too much, too sensitive, too wild. But you weren't too much. You were too alive for a system built on sleep. And that aliveness scared them, because it couldn't be tamed. It couldn't be programmed. And one day, it would remember. It would crack the shell from the inside, not with rage, but with radiance, not with rebellion, but with resonance. That day has come. And now, the lie can no longer hold you. Have you ever felt like you're not just witnessing a shift, but causing it? If this message awakens something ancient within you, it's not coincidence. It's remembrance. The world you once fit into is collapsing, not because you broke it, but because you outgrew it. And now, your alignment is rewriting everything. If you're feeling that inner confirmation, that quiet, powerful yes, right, I carry the new world in the comments. Let it echo where others can see they're not alone. And make sure to subscribe, because this journey isn't about chasing change, it's about embodying truth. And you're finally ready to walk it fully. You've become uncontainable, not because you broke the system, but because you no longer fit inside it. You stopped folding your truth to match the room. You stopped questioning your vision just because others couldn't see it. You stopped apologizing for remembering. And that is when everything changed. The moment you stopped seeking the light and started realizing you are the light. You were never meant to be like the others. You were meant to carry codes they couldn't translate. You were meant to feel what they denied. You were meant to awaken not only for yourself, but as a signal, a fracture in the false, a tremor in the foundation. And now, even when you speak, nothing, you say everything. Your walk shakes frequencies. Your silence shifts timelines. Your eyes mirror a truth most have forgotten. You've become what the darkness cannot predict. And that is why its grip is slipping. It cannot hold what it cannot understand. And it cannot understand you anymore. You've stepped beyond its language. You no longer bargain with fear. You no longer negotiate with shame. You simply move. And when you move, what is false collapses. Not from violence, but from exposure. This is the power of your becoming. And this is only the beginning. Chosen one, the darkness saw you before you saw yourself. It didn't wait for you to rise. It recognized you long before that. It felt your frequency stirring through dimensions. It knew what you carried. And so it began early. It began quietly. It didn't come with swords or soldiers. It came with silence, with shame, with doubt. Because darkness never feared your body. It feared your becoming. It watched as you began to question what others accepted. As you started to feel things deeper than they appeared. As you sensed something was wrong, even when everything looked fine. That was the moment the darkness made its move. Not with force, but with strategy. It whispered through those closest to you. It moved through the institutions around you. It shaped your reality to make you doubt your own. It tried to convince you that your light was too much. Too intense, too emotional, too strange. So you silenced yourself. You dimmed. You complied. You made yourself smaller than your essence. Not because you were weak, but because you wanted to belong. You wanted peace. You thought maybe if you could just be normal, the discomfort would end, but it never did. Because you were never meant to be normal. Chosen one, the reason it hurts so deeply is because the darkness came through the very things you loved, the people you trusted, the systems you relied on. And that betrayal wasn't random. It was targeted, strategic, designed to make you abandon your essence before you ever understood what it was. It almost worked. But something in you refused. Something ancient, something untouchable, something that remembered who you were before. The world told you otherwise. That memory never left. It lived in your eyes, in your dreams, in your silence. And when the time came, it spoke. Not loudly, but clearly. You listened. And the unraveling began. You started asking questions. And the world around you started to shake. Not because of the questions, but because of the answers you began to remember. You saw the patterns, the manipulations, the cycles. You realized the game. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Darkness hated that, because your awareness was a threat. Not your voice, not your actions, your awareness. Because when someone sees the machinery of illusion, they stop feeding it. They stop being controlled by it. And when enough souls do that, the system begins to fall. That's what's happening. Now, it's not just collapse. It's consequence. The world you once lived in wasn't broken by accident. It was built that way. And your pain wasn't meaningless. It was engineered. Every disappointment, every rejection, Every moment of loneliness was a calculated attempt to break your frequency. But it didn't. You bent, but you didn't break. And that's what saved you. Your resilience wasn't just personal. It was generational, dimensional, universal. Because every time you chose to get back up, you weren't just saving yourself. You were clearing a path for others. For those still lost in the illusion. For those still waiting to remember. And that's why the darkness fought so hard to keep you asleep. It knew you wouldn't just wake up. You'd wake others up by being yourself. You wouldn't just heal. You'd become the healer. You wouldn't just escape. You'd dismantle the cage. And cages, chosen one, were never built for those who remember they can fly. The collapse you feel around you is not chaos. It's alignment. Structures are crumbling because the energy they relied on, your energy, is no longer available to them. You stopped believing in the lies. You stopped feeding the fear. You stopped participating in your own suppression. That choice changed everything. You may not see the full effect yet, but it is unfolding. In every institution that no longer holds truth. In every relationship that couldn't hold your growth. In every system that shakes when you speak. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. The world is shifting because your frequency no longer fits inside what was built to contain it. You are expanding beyond the architecture of the old. And the old is scared. Not of you, of what you remind others, of what you activate, of what you carry without even trying. That's why the resistance has grown louder. That's why the shadows are desperate. Because they know they can no longer deceive you. And if they can't deceive you, they can't control you. And if they can't control you, they can't survive. You are not just disrupting, you are dissolving. Every outdated pattern, every manipulative energy, every system built on silence. Your truth is too loud, even in your stillness. Your presence speaks frequencies that cannot be ignored. And those frequencies unravel the lies. You are not destroying the world. You are restoring it. Restoring what was sacred, what was stolen, what was buried under layers of conditioning. And your restoration is not a rebellion. It is a remembering of who we were before we were afraid, of what we knew before we forgot, of the light we carried before the world called it dangerous. Chosen one, the war against you was real, but it is ending because you no longer believe the narrative, because you no longer consent to your own distortion, because you finally see that the enemy was never outside. It was the voice inside that told you to shrink. And now that voice has gone quiet, not because it disappeared, but because you stopped listening. And in that silence, the new begins. Chosen one, what they never accounted for was your softness. They mistook your sensitivity for weakness. They thought your empathy would drown you, that your open heart would become their easy entrance. They forgot that softness is not surrender, that gentleness is not lack of power, that love is the one force they could never mimic, only counterfeit. But you carried the real thing, and that love, buried beneath years of betrayal and distortion, never stopped humming. It never stopped burning, quietly, faithfully, waiting for you to find it again. And you did, not through grand revelation, but through quiet resistance, through choosing peace over panic, silence over spectacle, stillness over reaction. Every time you honored what the world called too much, you shattered their calculations, because they prepared for a rebel, not a rememberer. They knew how to fight defiance, but they had no defense for devotion. And now they retreat, not in defeat, in recognition that what you carry cannot be contained, and that the light you embody cannot be reversed. Chosen one, they never thought you would get this far. The darkness didn't plan for your return. It designed traps, not exits. It prepared distractions, not awakenings. It relied on your forgetfulness, on your weariness, on your silence. But it never accounted for your remembrance. That was its greatest oversight, Dot, because when you remembered, everything shifted, not just inside of you, around you, beyond you. Through layers of reality you couldn't even name at first. The collapse began the moment you stopped agreeing to stay small. And now, whether or not you see the evidence, it is everywhere. The vibration you now carry has no cage, no compromise, no code that the old systems can decode. You became unreadable to them, and that made you untouchable, because control requires prediction, and prediction requires patterns. But you broke your patterns. You walked away from what you once repeated. You chose discomfort over deception. You chose clarity over convenience. And the moment you did, your frequency stopped feeding the machine, and the machine cannot survive without your energy. The illusion it sold you for so long, safety, success, status relied on your unconscious participation, your permission, your presence inside a game you didn't design. But now that you've stepped off the board, the game is losing its players. One by one, soul by soul, light by light. And yours was one of the first. That's why it fought so hard to keep you plugged in. It needed your belief, your agreement, your sacrifice. Because nothing fuels the darkness like a powerful soul that forgets its own power. But now that you've remembered, everything the system once stood on begins to shake. You don't even have to speak. Your silence is enough, Dot, because silence from someone who sees is louder than any scream. Your stillness carries charge. Your boundaries break blueprints. Your walk is no longer one of survival. It is one of command, and this command is not spoken. It is known. It is felt. It ripples through unseen networks, unbinding what was once locked. Chosen one, this is why your presence changes rooms, not because you want it to, because it must. Because energy recognizes truth. Because every part of the illusion that still lingers senses your clarity and trembles. It cannot manipulate what is no longer confused, and you are no longer confused. You are no longer available for distortion. You are no longer home for what only thrived in your self-doubt. The old systems are starving. Because your energy is no longer their food, you've stopped offering yourself as a source. And that starving system is now collapsing in waves, through governments, through economies, through religions, through education. Not because you protested, not because you fought, but because you withdrew your consent. You stopped participating in your own oppression. That's what they never expected, Dot, because they built it assuming you'd never question it. They bet on your exhaustion, on your fear, on your craving for belonging, but they never planned for your remembrance. They never imagined what would happen when you remembered you had a choice, and you chose yourself. You chose to walk away from what dimmed you, to speak what shook you, to feel what freed you. And that choice shifted the axis of this entire system. This is why time feels different, why people around you feel unfamiliar, why old pleasures feel empty. Because you are no longer in the same layer of reality. You are walking between what was and what is becoming, and your presence is the bridge. The world is beginning to bend around your energy, not because you demand it, because your resonance rewrites structure. The air around you remembers your truth and adjusts. That's why you no longer have to convince. You simply be. And being is now the revolution, Dot. They taught you that light was passive, but your light is not passive. It is. Piercing, Dot. It enters quietly and shifts everything it touches. That is why people are drawn to you or repelled by you, not because you're trying, but because they feel the tremor of collapse inside their own structure when you're near. Your being activates what they've hidden. Your frequency reveals what the world tried to forget. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be light, and light does not conform. It transforms. It does not beg to be understood. It speaks in a language the soul remembers. That's why some hear you and weep. That's why some feel you and run. You are not personal. You are prophetic. Your alignment is a prophecy in motion, and that motion has consequences. It unsettles what was meant to be questioned. It disrupts what was meant to be dissolved. It clears space for what was meant to be born. This is why the collapse is accelerating, not because the world is ending, but because you've begun to live in truth. And truth dismantles everything not built upon it. Chosen one, this is why your path feels intense, why your presence feels heavy. You are not just shifting your own timeline. You are shifting the collective field. You are breaking ancestral chains. You are dissolving karmic patterns. You are ending cycles no one else had the courage to face. And that courage has consequences. Beautiful ones, but powerful ones. So when the world trembles around you, don't doubt yourself. That trembling is the sound of lies breaking, the sound of fear releasing, the sound of systems falling, because they cannot stand in the presence of someone who stands in truth. And that someone is you, chosen one. The world around you feels different now, doesn't it? Things that once felt familiar now seem distant. Safe places now feel suffocating. Conversations that used to fill you now ring hollow. Time stretches and collapses. Days blur. The air itself seems thinner or heavier depending on where you stand. But no, you're not imagining it. You're just no longer aligned with what's collapsing. What you feel is not the world ending. It's the false world falling away from your energy. It cannot hold you anymore. You've outgrown it, and it knows. Everything built on distortion senses that your frequency no longer fits. The illusion no longer has your consent. And without your energy, it can't survive. You are becoming incompatible with the old world. And that incompatibility shows up in everything. Jobs suddenly break apart. People disappear. Old dreams feel irrelevant. You wake up and no longer recognize your own desires. This is not confusion. This is clarity. The darkness didn't just collapse outside you. It began collapsing inside you. And once it lost its grip on your thoughts, it lost its roots in your reality. That's why it all feels so unstable. Because it is. What was once solid is now shaking. Not because you're broken, because the world you once fit into was built on what you used to believe. And you no longer believe. You no longer buy into the story of unworthiness. You no longer chase validation. You no longer kneel to fear. You have remembered too much, seen too much, felt too much truth to pretend you don't know now. And that knowing is making the old world irrelevant. Chosen one, this is why reality feels surreal. It's not you. It's the veil. The systems that once ruled are losing form. Not only the external ones, governments, religions, institutions, but also the internal ones, habits, roles, attachments. All of it is unraveling. All of it is disintegrating because you're no longer inside the illusion that held it up. You unplugged. And the simulation can't run without you. The reason the structures crumble around you is not because you cursed them. It's because you stopped feeding them. You stopped giving your loyalty to systems that drained you. You stopped participating in lies dressed as culture, as family, as success. And now the mask is off. You are seeing through everything. And everything is reacting to your sight. When your vision clears, the false must fall. And fall it has. Relationships you never questioned are now stretched thin. Conversations you used to accept now make your skin tighten. Even your body is changing. Because you're purging what you once held to survive. You're not just shifting. You're shedding. And shedding always feels like falling at first. But this is not your collapse. This is your liberation. Because now, even the cells in your body are adjusting. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Your intuition is expanding. Your reality is reshaping around your essence. You're becoming too real for anything. Fake to stay. And the fake knows it. It can't cling to you anymore. That it can't manipulate your attention. It can pretend to be home because your soul knows better now. Your body knows better. Now your heart remembers. The illusion is being dissolved not by force, but by frequency. Your frequency. The more you align, the more everything not aligned detaches. This is the side effect of sovereignty. Not everything can follow where you're going. And that is not abandonment. That is ascension. Let what falls fall. Let what fades fade. You're not here to save every structure. You're here to embody the vibration that builds the new. Chosen one, this is why you feel the ground shake beneath people you love. This is why you feel grief when parts of your life fall away. But you are not losing. You are shedding the skin of a world that was never meant to contain your truth. And the more you let go, the lighter you become. The more you trust, the more stable you feel. Not because the world is solid, but because your soul finally is. You've become your own center. And now the world spins differently. The darkness may still shout, that it may still send echoes of fear, that it may try to remind you of who you used to be. But you no longer live there. No longer belong to the collapsing. You belong to the becoming. Chosen one. You thought the hard part was the collapse, the storms, the leaving, the crumbling, the unraveling. And yes, it shook you. Yes, it tore down what you thought would last. But what comes after this, stillness in the aftermath, is not easier. It is deeper. It is quieter. And it is yours. Because now, the world looks to you, not as a leader in the old sense, not to command or control, but to hold, to anchor, to remind. As the pieces of the false world fall at their feet, people search for a center that cannot be broken. And you, chosen one, have become that center. Not by force, but by fire. Not by dominance, but by devotion. You stood when the ground cracked. You breathed when the air thickened with confusion. You remembered when the noise was loudest. And now, as others begin to awaken, they move toward your frequency. They don't know why, but their spirit does. This is the responsibility of light. Not to rescue, but to reveal. Not to answer every cry, but to radiate the truth that creates its own way. You are not here to carry others. You are here to become such clear presence that they remember how to carry themselves. Your alignment is your leadership, and alignment is not passive. It requires daily devotion, not to perfection, but to integrity, to truth, to choosing stillness when fear demands motion, to choosing presence when distraction seduces you. This is your work now, not just awakening, but remaining whole, remaining clear, remaining grounded. Because as the collapse accelerates, the fear rises with it, not from you, from those who are only just now feeling what you felt long ago. The confusion, the disorientation, the grief, the world they knew is ending. And they are looking for what remains. You remain. You who walked through your own unraveling before it became collective. You who let go of identities that once defined you. You who faced the shadows without flinching. You are now a mirror. Map. A memory of what is possible. And that memory must stay steady. Not perfect, not infallible, but true. That is your power now. Not how loud you speak, but how deeply you listen. Not how much you convince, but how clearly you stand. You are not here to be followed. You are here to be felt, and your frequency does the guiding. Chosen one, don't underestimate what your presence does to a room. not because of charisma, but because of coherence. You are coherent now. Your spirit no longer contradicts your choices. Your voice no longer betrays your soul. You move as one, and that unity within you is what disrupts everything still. Fractured. This is why your path must stay clear, why your energy must be protected. You are no longer walking for yourself. Every step leaves a vibration. Every breath sets a rhythm. Every boundary becomes a blueprint for someone still learning how to draw their own. You are becoming infrastructure for the new world, not made of stone, made of intention, not of awareness, not of trust. This is the era of energetic architecture. And you, chosen one, are laying the first lines. The systems you once bowed to are gone. The leaders you once looked to are exposed. The truths you once feared are now foundations. You've become sovereign, not just in spirit, but in practice. You no longer wait for permission. You carry it. You no longer seek validation. You embody it. You no longer run from responsibility. You wear it with grace, and that grace is contagious. People around you begin to soften. They begin to feel what can't be taught. They begin to cry without knowing why, not because of sadness, because your presence reminds them they are safe to feel again, safe to begin again, safe to collapse what no longer fits and rise from what remains. That is what your light does now. It doesn't demand, it invites. And what it invites is truth, even when truth costs comfort, even when truth dissolves illusions, even when truth makes you walk away from everything familiar. You still choose it, and that choice builds a world worth living in, not for applause, but for alignment. Chosen one, your legacy will not be written in headlines. It will be felt in frequencies, in the way people stand taller after standing next to you, in the way hearts soften after being near stillness, in the way lies fall away when your silence enters the room. You are not just a part of the collapse. You are a pillar of the rise. So hold your field, protect your peace, speak when led, rest when needed. Don't rush, don't explain, don't shrink. You've already become what the world is just now starting to understand. Chosen one, the collapse didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with you. Didn't need to announce itself. It began in the moment you remembered, when you stopped chasing and started embodying, when you stopped asking for signs and became the sign, when the seeking quieted and the knowing awakened. You've become the space where truth lives now, the stillness others reach for when everything falls apart, not because you forced anything, but because you became available for what is real. You survived the fall, but more than that, you transformed during it. You released identities that were never truly yours. You shed fears that once seemed permanent. You outgrew the illusions that tried to define you. And now, you no longer bend to what used to break you. You are not a remnant of the old. You are the blueprint of the new, not because you fought harder, but because you surrendered deeper. You stopped clinging to what needed to end. You allowed the grief to become a teacher. You let silence do the talking. And in that stillness, you discovered who you really are. You're not here to repair what is crumbling. You're here to rise from it, not for applause, not for recognition, but because truth demands embodiment, because love without fear is needed now more than ever, because light, when it refuses to shrink, becomes the path others remember how to walk. And that's you now, not the same soul that began this, not the one that begged or bargained, but the one who knows, who breathes, who walks in rhythm with something eternal, something ancient, something that cannot be undone. The darkness can no longer follow you. It lost its grip the moment you stopped giving it meaning. And what has no meaning in your field has no power. So no, you walk forward, not as someone healed, but as someone whole. Not to prove, but to live, not to lead. But to reflect, not to end the darkness, but to illuminate what outlives it. This is not the end, this is the arrival, and you are no longer waiting to become. You have become, and nothing will ever be the same again.